Are you tired of making grand plans in your planner and your calendar only to not follow through with them and have your to-do list get even longer and longer? I want you to tune into this episode to learn how to go from planning in vain to sticking to your schedule and actually doing what you plan. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Tiffany Shelton-Mariol, neuropsychologist, published author, and founder of Mod Ambition. I post every week about how to plan, manifest, and enjoy your dream life. So if you're into that kind of stuff, please tappity tap that subscribe button or follow if you're listening on the podcast. So there have been certainly times in my life that I either lacked the discipline to follow through with what I planned, or I let life take control of my schedule. Over the years, in order to manifest big accomplishments like getting a PhD, writing 3 books, running a side business with a full-time job and 2 babies, I really had to learn how to follow through with what I put on my calendar. So in today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to do exactly that so you can stop procrastinating and rescheduling those things that you put onto your schedule and actually get them done. So let's dive into these easy ways to actually do what you plan. So the first thing I want to discuss with you is the topic of realistic planning. If you're going to stick to your schedule, you need to have a schedule that's realistic in the first place. This is where many of us actually fail before we get started. I know for me, this has been a huge game changer. Maybe because I'm an optimist, or maybe because I have a weird sense of time. When I first started my PhD program, I would really underestimate the time it would take for me to complete a task. This led me to constantly feeling behind and not getting everything done that I had planned for the day, then feeling guilty at the end of the day when I didn't get to do everything on my to-do list. So let's talk about how you can plan for success. The first thing I want you to do when you're planning is to break up larger projects into smaller tasks. By doing this, you're going to be able to better time block and have more accurate ways of doing so. So for instance, if you want to work on writing a report on a day in your schedule, instead of time blocking out write report over several hours, I want you to time block writing each section of that report. So you would maybe do 1 hour for the introduction and maybe 2-hour blocks for the body of the report and maybe 3 hours for the end of the report. However much time your reports take, but I want you to break it down into smaller tasks. Another thing that can help you be more realistic with your planning is to add buffers into your schedule. Buffers allow you grace and also help compensate for our tendency to think that we can do more with our time that we actually have. Essentially, buffers kind of bring you back down to earth and give you some breathing room just in case you don't get to finish the task in the time that you thought you would finish it in the first place. Another thing that's going to help you plan more realistically is lowering the bar. Now, this is something that you won't hear me say very often, but when it comes to planning, I think it's really effective to help you actually stick to your schedule. So when you think about what you plan for the day, basing this off of your goals that you have for the week and the intentions that you have for the week, I want you to plan in a way that makes it very easy for you to complete what you need to do. That way, when you go to sit down to look at your schedule, you don't feel overwhelmed and it doesn't feel like I can't do this very easily. Instead, you can sit down and say, oh, I can do this. Let's get it. This is something that I use a lot when I'm trying to start a new habit. For instance, when I started meditating, I set the goal of meditating just 2 minutes every day. This way, when I sat down to do it, I knew that it's something that I could very easily do, and it wasn't something daunting like meditating 20 minutes. Setting the bar low in this way is a way to get yourself going on a task, and the great thing is you'll likely be able to get more done while also sticking to your schedule. Also, a helpful way to make sure that your plan for the day is realistic is to use the Eisenhower matrix. This is going to help you prioritize what's urgent and what's important so that when you sit down to work, you know that what you're going to be working on is the most valuable task, which is going to add to your motivation to actually stick to your plan for that day. Lastly, when it comes to realistic planning, I want you to focus your schedule for the day on goals that are going to help you move closer to your larger than life goals. Specifically, your schedule should be filled with tasks and projects that are what I like to call SMART-C. So this means not only are they specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, but they're also controllable. I add that C at the end. One of the things I love about the Mod Ambition Planner is it guides you through setting what I call moon goals and star goals. Moon goals are those larger than life goals where you want to be in like a year from now, 3 years from now, etc. And then you have those star goals, which are the stepping stones along the way that you can focus on in your daily lives that are going to bring you closer to those moon goals. And I think it's helpful to not only make these goals by that popular acronym of SMART, but you can also make them things that you can control. And like I said, the Mod Ambition Planner walks you through all of this in the goal setting planner at the beginning of the planner. And it also helps you implement it throughout the quarter in your day-to-day life. As it relates to realistic planning, make sure that your schedule includes things that you can control in your journey to getting where you want to be. For instance, if you want to gain 1,000 followers on Instagram, for instance, in the next 30 days, a SMART goal could be post 1 time a day, every day for 3 months. So while you can't control how many people actually follow you, you can control showing up consistently and tracking that progress. And focusing your daily schedule on things you control can increase your motivation each day to actually stick to what you planned. Okay, now that you have a realistic schedule, let's move on to beating procrastination. Sometimes our plan is realistic and we have our most important tasks line up, but we just can't get it together to sit down and do what we planned. And last week I made a whole video about this called Unmotivated to Work, How to Get Ish Done Anyway, which I'm gonna link below, as well as I'll tee it up at the end of this. However, in this video, I wanted to speak more specifically on how to beat procrastination as it pertains to sticking to your schedule. And first, I want to dive a little bit into the mindset strategies that are going to help you beat procrastination and really hunker down on what you need to do. First, I want you to be mindful of your emotions and thoughts. What I mean by this is to become more aware of what pulls you away from your schedule and what are the triggers that inhibit you from doing what you planned. Is it that you get distracted with shiny object syndrome? Is it that you're feeling unmotivated? Is it that you don't feel competent or you have some type of anxiety about what you have to do? And then once you have a good idea of what's triggering your procrastination, this is going to empower you to plan for it and personalize it specifically using strategies for what's getting in your way. This is also the time to become mindful of the thoughts and the emotions that are showing up for you when your procrastination is triggered. So when you become aware of exactly how you're feeling in these moments and the thoughts, meaning the words going through your head at that time, you can use tools like thought restructuring to help you work through the procrastination. For instance, if you sit down to do a task and you realize that you're trying to procrastinate because you feel bored and you think about the thoughts in your head at that time, and you might be thinking something like, I hate that I have to do this. I wish I could just be free to do what I want in my time. If you dive a bit deeper into that, you may realize that it's coming from a limiting belief or some sort of feeling of being trapped in your life. I'll give you an example in my own life. There was a time in my life where I was working at an administrative job that, simply put, I really hated. And I would procrastinate in the work that I had to do there because it was so boring to me and I really just didn't enjoy it. And when I did the conscious work to really realize why I wasn't productive at this job, because I am a productive person, I realized that I was feeling trapped at my job. I almost felt like I was in a cage, if I had to use an analogy for it. Like I was stuck at this job that I hated. And I was able to discover that my limiting belief at that time was I didn't feel like I had freedom in my life. And being in the psychology world, I was able to use tools to restructure that limiting belief and come up with a mantra that I could tell myself in that moment that helped me reshift to my positive beliefs when I was triggered to procrastinate. So what I would do in those moments when I would feel triggered to procrastinate, I would say to myself, sometimes I feel like I don't have freedom in my life, but I know that I'm creating freedom by working a job that pays for my cost of living and gives me the experience I need while also making plans for and working on the side to create a life I love. And just making this shift and consciously tuning into my emotions and my thoughts really helped me stop procrastinating and get my work done. Another mindset shift that's going to help you stick to your schedule and actually do what you plan is something called committed action. Committed action is a concept within acceptance and commitment therapy where you learn to accept difficult emotions and experiences instead of avoiding them, while also simultaneously committing to actions that bring you closer to what you value. For instance, let's say that you're sitting down to do a new task that you've never done before, and so some feelings of anxiety come up because you don't feel prepared for the task and it's really feeling daunting. Utilizing the concept of committed action instead of avoiding this anxiety by putting the task off, you're going to accept how you feel and commit to doing the work anyway in service of moving closer to your value of, let's say, evolving. Even if you have to carry that anxiety with you in the background, you might be thinking, well, how do I accept that anxiety? Emotional acceptance is a combination of mindful awareness, so being aware of the emotion that you're trying to accept in the first place, and then it's also a combination of self-compassion and patience. So in this example, you would become mindful of the anxiety and the dread that you're feeling. You would have compassion for yourself by maybe taking a few deep breaths and highlighting to yourself that it's normal to feel anxious when you're doing something new. And then finally, having patience with yourself to know that with time, you're going to be able to get better with this and you won't feel as anxious. The last mindset trick that I want to share with you when it comes to procrastination comes from the book The War of Art. And in this book, the author discusses having a professional mindset versus an amateur mindset. He says that by assuming your role as a professional, you are better able to push through resistance that fuels procrastination. He says, I mean the professional as an ideal, the professional in contrast to the amateur. Consider the differences. The amateur plays for fun, the professional plays for keeps. To the amateur, the game is his avocation. To the pro, it's his vocation. The amateur plays part-time, the professional plays full-time. The amateur is a weekend warrior. The professional is 7 days a week. The word amateur comes from the Latin root to love. The conventional interpretation is that the amateur pursues his calling out of love, while the pro does it for money. Not the way I see it. In my view, the amateur does not love the game enough. If he did, he would not pursue it as a sideline, distinct from his real vocation. The professional loves it so much, he dedicates his life to it. He commits full time. That's what I mean when I say turning pro. Resistance hates it when we turn pro. And I really love this concept of really thinking about when you have your schedule for the day and you have tasks that you know are meaningful to your profession and where you want to go in life, even if it's just, managing your home. When you think about, am I an amateur? Am I a pro at what I'm sitting down to do or what am I about to do? It shifts your mindset to take it seriously, and you furthermore lean into what you have scheduled for yourself just from this mindset of thinking of yourself as a professional who is dedicated and committed to what you have planned for yourself, which makes you stick to the deadlines that you set for yourself. And another helpful thing that you can do to kind of trick your mind into beating procrastination is just taking the first step. So decide on the minimal viable action that it's going to take for you to do what you have planned for your day and just commit to doing the first part of it. There are a couple of great things about this. Firstly, research shows that those who commit to just taking the first step is the quintessential difference between productive people and those that are not. Secondly, it's common that once you get started on a task, it's like a domino effect, when you push the domino and the rest of them fall, that you're just going to flow and to keep going with the other ones just by taking that first step. And speaking of flow, getting into a flow state quickly while you're working is going to be a great way to beat procrastination. Stephen Kotler, who is a flow state researcher, says, flow is technically defined as an optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. I like to call it the work version of meditation. And Kotler says that if you find yourself procrastinating, a way to activate flow state so that you can get things done is to make boring tasks more challenging, or if the task is too hard, making you feel anxious, break it down into smaller tasks. So essentially, you're increasing dopamine to overcome boredom, or you're going to be decreasing cortisol if you're feeling anxious about a task. Okay, so now once you have the mindset in check when you're facing procrastination that's really taking you off your schedule, you can start to focus on these other things to nip procrastination in the bud and actually take the action on what you need to get done. The first thing you can do is focus on injecting your task with pleasure, and some ways to add pleasure to things that you have to do can be gamifying the task, so setting a challenge for yourself, such as competing with your partner to see who can clean a room faster, or coworker, those kinds of things. Another thing you can do to infuse pleasure is to give yourself a reward when the task is done, like a small piece of chocolate. I also find it valuable to reflect on the meaning of the work that you're doing. When you connect with your why, that increases motivation to get things done and adds a bit of pleasure to the work that you're doing. And then lastly, when it comes to beating procrastination, I certainly have to mention techniques to eliminate distraction and impulsivity. So here are some quick things that you can do to make sure that you're not distracted while you're working, so you can stick to your schedule. I stick to only checking my emails at designated times of the day so that I stick to my priorities throughout the day and not other people's priorities. I put my phone away while I'm working, out of arm's reach for obvious reasons. I work with a full screen so that I'm not tempted to start clicking on other apps on the internet. And I say no to other people a lot, which means I have non-negotiable time blocks within my schedule so I can do my very best and really focus. If you're finding this information helpful so far, I want you to please smash that like button. Be sure to subscribe to the channel or follow on the podcast. It really helps me keep showing up to provide you with the best information on planning, manifesting, and enjoying your dream life. Now, if you're distracted, I want you to come back to me and listen up, because these next tools for procrastination work so well, you'll be wondering, why don't they teach us this stuff in school? Here are some tactical strategies to respect the deadlines you set for yourself and actually do what you plan. The first thing is visualization. I want you to envision your day before you get started on the work that you're going to be doing. So in the Mod Ambition Planner that I designed, there's a prompt for you to set your intention for the day. And what I like to do is, after I set this intention, I take a look at everything I have planned for that day, and I take a minute to visualize how I would want that day to look. I envision myself working through everything that I planned and that I set out on my schedule, and I also tune into how I want to feel as I'm doing these tasks. The second tactical strategy is to use timers. Parkinson's law dictates that a task will expand to the time that you allow for it, and you can use this law to your advantage by time blocking and using a timer to be more conscious of time in the moment. Another tactical strategy to beating procrastination so you can get everything done on your schedule is to use background music. Specifically, I always like to recommend alpha wave study music that is really going to help your brain get into that flow state that we talked about earlier. Another helpful strategy to getting things done is accountability. I know for myself, this is an excellent tool when I really want to make sure I get things done. I tell someone else, making myself more accountable, and it's usually a guaranteed way for me to get things done without procrastinating. And the last strategy I have for you to make sure you stick to your schedule is to write down your squirrels. You know that popular euphemism, people that easily get distracted can get distracted anytime a squirrel runs by. Well, I want you to start writing down what your distractions are instead of following them. I like to use a whiteboard on my desk, a little small desk whiteboard, to write things down so that I can keep the idea that comes to me, but I don't have to follow it in the moment. I can write it down and either add it to my planner later, or I can kind of tackle it at the end of the day if I have a break. Also, here is a book list for further reading on tackling procrastination that you can screenshot now. Like I said earlier, I've teed up for you next a video from last week with more strategies to help you when you're feeling unmotivated to work. And if you're interested in the Mod Ambition Planner, which I talked about, I will leave a link for it in the description below. I would love to end this episode by offering an intention for you this week. May you offer yourself love by respecting the deadlines you set for yourself. Cheers to planning, manifesting, and enjoying your dream life. If you like this episode, please follow the podcast or subscribe to the channel. And until next time, namaste.